Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching the swirling nebula paint the darkness in shades of purple and gold. The mining station Kepler-7 hummed beneath his feet, its massive extractors pulling rare metals from the asteroid field that surrounded them like a glittering wall. For 3 years, he had called this place home, working alongside beings from across the galaxy in what was supposed to be a symbol of interspecies cooperation. The laughter echoing from the recreation hall behind him suggested otherwise. "Did you see the human trying to lift those crates today?" The voice belonged to Zexkar, a Vorthak whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights. His mandibles clicked in amusement as he spoke to his companions. "Pathetic little creature nearly broke himself trying to move what any of us could handle with one appendage." A chorus of agreement rose from the mixed group of aliens gathered around the gaming tables. There was Thais, a serpentine naga whose scales shifted color with her emotions, currently displaying the deep blue of contempt. Beside her sat 3 Corvan warriors, their gray skin marked with the ritual scars that indicated their rank in their military hierarchy. Even Piptok, usually the most reasonable of the group, joined in with his melodic laughter that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Marcus had heard variations of this conversation countless times over the past months. At first, he had tried to prove himself through hard work and dedication. He volunteered for extra shifts, studied their languages, and attempted to bridge the cultural gaps that seemed to widen with each passing day. But respect was something that apparently had to be earned through strength alone in this corner of the galaxy. And by their standards, humans were laughably weak. The truth was more complicated than they realized. Earth's gravity was significantly higher than most inhabited worlds, making humans naturally stronger than they appeared. But more importantly, humans possessed something that these beings had never encountered in their comfortable, technologically advanced civilizations: the ability to adapt, to endure, and to survive against impossible odds. Marcus turned away from the window and walked past the recreation hall, ignoring the renewed burst of laughter that followed his appearance. He made his way through the sterile corridors to his quarters, passing the various species that made up the station's population. Some nodded politely, others simply ignored him, but the underlying current of dismissal was always there. His room was sparse compared to the elaborate quarters of his colleagues. Where they filled their spaces with trophies, art, and comfortable furnishings that spoke of wealth and status, Marcus kept only the essentials: a bed, a desk, a small food preparation unit, and a single photograph of Earth taken from orbit. To his alien colleagues, this simplicity was just another sign of human inferiority, evidence that his species lacked the sophistication to appreciate finer things. They were wrong about that, too. Marcus sat at his desk and activated his personal terminal, pulling up the work schedules for the next rotation. As the station's logistics coordinator, he was responsible for ensuring that materials and personnel moved efficiently throughout the facility. It was a job that required attention to detail, strategic thinking, and an understanding of how different species worked together. Ironically, it was also a position that gave him access to information about every person on the station. Over the months, he had quietly observed and documented the behavior patterns, strengths, and weaknesses of his colleagues. Not out of malice, but out of the human instinct to understand potential threats. It was a survival mechanism that had served his species well throughout their evolutionary history, even if others saw it as paranoia or antisocial behavior. The communication console chimed softly, indicating an incoming message from the station commander, Admiral Kethvar. The massive Thraxian's image appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he spoke. "Chen, I need to see you in my office immediately. We have a situation that requires your unique perspective." Marcus raised an eyebrow. In 3 years, Kethvar had never requested his input on anything beyond routine logistics. The admiral was known for his tactical brilliance and had led successful campaigns against pirate fleets throughout the sector. For him to seek out the station's lone human suggested something significant was happening. The command center was located in the heart of the station, protected by multiple layers of security and armor plating. Marcus made his way through the checkpoints, noting the increased tension among the security staff. Conversation stopped when he passed, and he caught fragments of worried discussions about long-range sensors and unidentified contacts. Admiral Kethvar's office was a testament to military efficiency, with tactical displays covering 3 walls and a massive desk that could accommodate the admiral's considerable size. Kethvar himself stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles. Despite his imposing presence, Marcus had always found him to be fair, if distant. "Sit," Kethvar commanded, gesturing to a chair that had been adjusted for human proportions. "We have a problem, and I believe your species' reputation for creative solutions might be relevant." Marcus settled into the chair and waited. He had learned that most alien species preferred to present information in their own way, without interruption. 6 hours ago, our long-range sensors detected a fleet approaching from the outer rim. Initial scans suggested it was a merchant convoy, so we prepared to offer standard refueling and resupply services. However, as they drew closer, we realized we were dealing with something else entirely. The main display activated, showing a tactical overview of the system. Red dots marked the positions of incoming ships, their formation clearly military in nature. "The Bloodfang Syndicate," Kethvar continued, his voice carrying a weight that Marcus had never heard before. "They're one of the most vicious pirate organizations in known space, led by a Zarathi warlord named Skarthak. His fleet has destroyed 17 mining operations in the past 2 years, and they don't leave survivors." Marcus studied the display, counting the red dots. "How many ships?" 43 combat vessels ranging from light raiders to heavy cruisers. They'll be here in 18 hours. Kethvar's 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that was almost physical. "Our defenses were designed to handle small raiding parties, not a full fleet. We have 12 security ships and a handful of automated defense platforms. The mathematics are unfavorable." The situation was becoming clear. Kepler-7 was about to be attacked by a force that vastly outnumbered and outgunned its defenders. In the face of certain destruction, the Admiral was grasping at straws, hoping that human ingenuity might offer some miracle solution. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind already working through possibilities. "What about evacuation?" "Impossible. We have over 2,000 personnel on the station, and our transport capacity is limited to perhaps 300. Even if we could evacuate everyone, the Syndicate would simply hunt down the fleeing ships." Kethvar's frustration was evident in the way his scales shifted color. "I've sent distress calls to nearby systems, but the closest military response is 4 days away." "So we fight." "We die," Kethvar corrected. "Skarthak doesn't take prisoners, and he doesn't negotiate. His reputation is built on absolute destruction." Marcus stood and approached the tactical display, studying the incoming formation. The Bloodfang ships moved in a loose but coordinated pattern that spoke of extensive combat experience. Their leader had clearly planned this attack carefully, choosing a target that was wealthy enough to be worth the effort, but isolated enough to be vulnerable. "Tell me about Skarthak," Marcus said, still examining the display. "Zarathi warlord, approximately 200 years old, which makes him middle-aged for his species. He's survived by being ruthless and paranoid, never takes unnecessary risks, never leaves loose ends, and never shows mercy. His crew is made up of the most violent criminals from a dozen different species, held together by fear and the promise of wealth." Marcus nodded, filing away the information. "And the rest of the station personnel? How are they taking the news?" Kethvar's expression darkened. "I haven't told them yet. Panic would only make the situation worse. I was hoping you might have some insight before I make the announcement. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The same beings who had mocked him for his perceived weakness were now depending on his species' reputation for finding solutions in impossible situations. Humans had earned that reputation through millennia of surviving disasters, wars, and extinction-level events through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. I need access to all personnel files, technical specifications for the station's systems, and detailed information about the incoming fleet, Marcus said. Also, I'll need authorization to implement whatever solutions I develop, regardless of how unconventional they might seem. Kethvar stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You have it, but Chen, I need you to understand the reality of our situation. This isn't a problem that can be solved through clever engineering or tactical maneuvering. We're facing a force that has destroyed entire worlds. Whatever you're thinking, the odds of success are irrelevant, Marcus interrupted. My species has never been good at accepting defeat. Give me what I need, and I'll give you a chance to survive. That's all I can promise. As Marcus left the command center with his new authorization codes, he could feel the weight of 2,000 lives settling on his shoulders. Somewhere behind him, he could hear the familiar sounds of alien laughter drifting from the recreation areas, the casual dismissal of the human who couldn't even lift a crate without strain. They had no idea what was coming, and they had no idea what a human could become when cornered. Marcus made his way back to his quarters, his mind already forming the outline of a plan that would require everything he had learned about his colleagues over the past 3 years. It would be dangerous, probably illegal, and almost certainly considered unethical by galactic standards. It would also be the only thing that could save them all. The hunt was about to begin. Marcus spent the next 4 hours in his quarters, surrounded by holographic displays showing personnel files, station schematics, and tactical analyses. The picture that emerged was both better and worse than he had initially thought. The station's inhabitants were skilled professionals, each species bringing unique capabilities to their roles. But they were also civilians, unaccustomed to violence and completely unprepared for the kind of coordinated brutality that the Bloodfang Syndicate represented. The Corvin warriors in the recreation hall would be the obvious choice for any defense force, but Marcus knew from his observations that their honor-based combat philosophy would be useless against pirate tactics. They fought with rigid formations and predictable strategies that had served them well in formal military engagements, but would crumble against an enemy that fought without rules. Zexkar and his Vorthak companions were physically powerful and naturally aggressive, but they were also individualistic to a fault. They would never submit to unified command, especially from a human they considered inferior. The Naga, like Thais, were intelligent and adaptable, but their culture valued intellectual pursuits over physical confrontation. Each species had evolved on worlds with different gravity, atmosphere, and environmental conditions. What they all shared was a common origin from civilizations that had achieved interstellar travel through cooperation and technological advancement. Violence, while not unknown, was typically something that happened to other people in distant places. Marcus closed the personnel files and turned his attention to the station itself. Kepler 7 was a marvel of engineering, a self-sustaining city in space designed to operate for decades without external support. Its modular construction allowed for expansion and modification, while redundant systems ensured that critical functions could continue even after significant damage. But it had not been designed as a fortress. The defensive systems were afterthoughts, added to deter small-scale piracy rather than repel a full military assault. The automated defense platforms were effective against individual ships, but would be overwhelmed quickly by the Syndicate's numbers. The mining operation itself presented interesting possibilities. The massive extractors that pulled rare metals from the surrounding asteroids were essentially industrial-scale weapons, capable of tearing apart rock and metal with focused energy beams. The problem was that they were slow, predictable, and completely unsuited for combat against maneuvering targets. Marcus leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, letting his mind wander through the problem space. Human military history was filled with examples of inferior forces defeating superior enemies through unconventional tactics, psychological warfare, and the willingness to do things that civilized opponents would never consider. The key was understanding that this wasn't really a military problem at all. It was a hunting problem. Scarthak and his pirates were predators, accustomed to overwhelming weaker prey through superior firepower and numbers. They expected fear, panic, and eventual surrender. What they wouldn't expect was to become prey themselves. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Marcus opened his eyes to see Admiral Kethvar's image on his screen, the Thraxian's expression grim. "I've made the announcement," Kethvar reported. The reaction was predictable. Most of the civilian personnel are requesting immediate evacuation, while the security staff are demanding reinforcements that don't exist. I've called a general assembly in 1 hour to discuss our options. Marcus nodded. "I'll be there. But first, I need you to authorize some system modifications." "What kind of modifications?" "The kind that will give us a fighting chance. Trust me." Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concern among his species. "Chen, I hope you know what you're doing. The Station Council is already questioning my decision to involve you in this matter." "Let them question. In 12 hours, their opinions won't matter." The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He activated his personal fabricator and began producing items that weren't listed in any standard equipment catalog. Small devices that could be hidden easily, programmed with instructions that would only activate under specific conditions. Each device was carefully crafted for a particular individual, designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities that Marcus had observed over months of patient study. Fear, pride, loyalty, greed, every sentient being had pressure points that could be manipulated by someone who understood how to apply the right leverage. The assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from every department and species gathered to discuss their impossible situation. Marcus entered quietly, taking a seat near the back where he could observe without drawing attention. The familiar pattern of social dynamics played out before him as different groups clustered together, species barriers reinforced by stress and uncertainty. Admiral Kethvar stood at the podium, his imposing presence commanding attention despite the chaos of competing conversations. "Citizens of Kepler-7," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. "We face a threat that requires unity and courage. The Bloodfang Syndicate will arrive in approximately 10 hours, and our survival depends on our ability to work together." Chief Engineer Vexelier, a spider-like arachnoid, raised one of her 8 arms. "Admiral, with respect, we are miners and technicians, not soldiers. Perhaps it would be better to negotiate with these pirates. Surely they can be reasoned with." A rumble of agreement passed through sections of the crowd. Marcus watched as hope flickered in various alien faces, the desperate belief that this problem could be solved through diplomacy and compromise. Security Chief Gorthak, one of the Corvin warriors, stood to respond. "The Bloodfang Syndicate does not negotiate. They destroy everything they touch. Our only option is to fight with honor and die well." "Easy words from someone whose people glorify death in battle," snapped Thys, her scales flashing angry reds and oranges. "Some of us have families to consider, futures to protect. There must be alternatives to suicide." The arguments continued, each species advocating for solutions that reflected their cultural values and evolutionary history. Marcus listened to it all, noting how quickly the facade of interspecies cooperation crumbled under pressure. These beings had worked together successfully for years, but that cooperation was built on shared prosperity and mutual benefit. When survival was at stake, they retreated to tribal instincts. Admiral Kethvar raised his hands for silence. I understand your concerns, but we must face reality. Evacuation is impossible, negotiation is futile, and our defensive capabilities are inadequate. However, there may be one alternative. All eyes turned toward Marcus as the Admiral gestured in his direction. The human felt the weight of 2,000 gazes, most of them skeptical or hostile. He stood slowly and made his way to the podium, aware of the whispered comments that followed his movement. Many of you know Marcus Chen as our logistics coordinator, Kethvar announced. What you may not know is that his species has a unique reputation in galactic military circles. Humans are considered resourceful in difficult situations. Marcus stepped up to the podium and looked out at the assembled crowd. He saw the same dismissive expressions he had encountered daily for 3 years, the subtle signs of contempt that his colleagues thought they were hiding. But now he also saw something else: desperation. Humans have a saying, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. When you're being hunted, become the hunter. The Bloodfang Syndicate expects to find frightened prey when they arrive. They expect panic, confusion, and easy targets. What they don't expect is to walk into a carefully prepared trap. Zexkar's mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as derisive laughter. And what exactly can one human do against 43 warships? Will you throw rocks at them with your pathetic strength? The comment drew chuckles from various parts of the audience, but Marcus didn't react. Instead, he activated the hall's main display and called up a tactical overview of the approaching pirate fleet. You're right that I can't fight 43 ships, Marcus acknowledged. But I don't have to. Pirates aren't soldiers. They're criminals who work together only as long as it's profitable. Take away their profit motive, convince them that their leader has made a fatal mistake, and they'll turn on each other before we fire a single shot. Chief Medical Officer Hithral, a tall, crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic vibrations, spoke up. You're talking about psychological warfare. Most civilized species consider such tactics to be morally questionable. Most civilized species haven't faced extinction in the last 48 hours, Marcus replied. The Bloodfang Syndicate won't show you mercy because you maintained moral superiority while they killed you. They'll respect strength and only strength. Pip Talk, the usually reasonable member of the recreation hall crowd, stood to address the assembly. Even if we accept your premise, how do you propose to implement these psychological tactics? We have no intelligence network, no way to communicate with the pirate fleet, and no experience in this kind of warfare. Marcus smiled, and several beings in the front rows shifted uncomfortably. There was something in that expression that didn't match their perception of the harmless human logistics coordinator. Actually, we have everything we need. This station processes more information in a day than most civilizations generate in a year. Every communication, every transaction, every personal interaction is logged and analyzed by our systems. The pirates will need to communicate with each other during their approach and attack, and those communications will pass through equipment we control. He gestured to the tactical display, which now showed communication intercepts from the approaching fleet. I've already begun monitoring their transmissions. Skarthak leads through fear and the promise of wealth, but his captains are ambitious and paranoid. They suspect each other of planning betrayal, and they're probably right. Security Chief Gorthak leaned forward, his scarred features showing interest for the first time. You're proposing to turn them against each other. I'm proposing to accelerate a process that's already happening. Every successful criminal organization contains the seeds of its own destruction. We just need to help those seeds grow. Admiral Kethvar studied the communication intercepts. his tactical experience allowing him to recognize the significance of what Marcus was showing. This is ambitious, but even if you could create discord among their forces, we would still need to deal with whatever ships remain loyal to Scarthak. Marcus nodded and activated another set of displays, showing the station's mining equipment and industrial systems. That's where the second phase of the plan comes in. We're going to make this station disappear. The audience erupted in confused chatter as beings tried to process what they had just heard. Marcus waited for the noise to die down before continuing. The asteroid field around Kepler 7 contains thousands of metallic objects that interfere with long-range sensors. If we can mask our energy signature and match the spectral characteristics of the surrounding rock, we can make the station invisible to their detection systems. Chief Engineer Vexilier's multiple eyes focused on the technical specifications Marcus was displaying. The power requirements alone would be enormous, not to mention the risk of system failure. And even if we could hide the station, what about the mining operations? The extractors generate energy signatures that can be detected from light years away. We shut them down, Marcus replied simply. Everything except life support and essential systems. For approximately 6 hours, Kepler 7 becomes a ghost. And then what? Demanded Thais, her scales now showing the deep blue of skepticism. We can't hide forever, and if they detect us after we've revealed our deception, they'll be even more ruthless in their response. Marcus looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes of beings who had dismissed him as inferior for 3 years. Then we hunt them down, one ship at a time, until none of them are left to threaten anyone ever again. The silence that followed was complete. 2,000 beings stared at the lone human who was proposing to single-handedly eliminate one of the most dangerous pirate organizations in known space. Finally, Admiral Kethvar spoke. Chen, what you're describing sounds like a plan for mass murder, not defense. Marcus's expression didn't change. Admiral, in approximately 9 hours, 43 ships full of murderers, rapists, and thieves are going to arrive at our doorstep. They're planning to kill everyone on this station, steal everything of value, and leave our bodies floating in space as a warning to others. When someone tries to kill you, killing them back isn't murder, it's survival. The assembly dissolved into heated arguments as different species debated the morality and practicality of Marcus's proposal. Some called it barbaric, others called it impossible, and a few called it the only chance they had. Marcus listened to it all with patient detachment, already knowing what the ultimate decision would be. Fear was a powerful motivator, and when faced with certain death, even the most civilized beings would choose the desperate option over noble defeat. He had learned that lesson from humanity's bloodiest chapters, the times when moral sophistication became a luxury that extinction couldn't afford. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than he had expected, but not close enough to matter. The motion to implement Marcus's plan passed by a margin of 63%, carried largely by the support of species whose homeworlds had direct experience with piracy and violence. As the assembly dispersed, Marcus found himself surrounded by beings who had spent years treating him as a curiosity or joke. Now they looked at him with expressions ranging from hope to terror, finally beginning to understand that the harmless human might not be quite as harmless as they had assumed. Admiral Kethvar approached as the hall emptied. I hope you know what you're doing, Chen. If this fails, we'll all be dead. But if it succeeds... He paused, studying Marcus with new respect. If it succeeds, the galaxy will never look at humans the same way again. Marcus began walking toward the exit, his mind already focused on the 1,000 details that would need perfect execution over the next 8 hours. Admiral, the galaxy stopped looking at humans correctly the moment they assumed we were weak. We're about to remind them of their mistake. 6 hours remained until the Bloodfang Syndicate's arrival, and Kepler 7 had transformed into something its builders never intended, The bustling mining station had gone silent, its normal operations suspended as 2,000 beings worked to implement a plan that most of them didn't fully understand. Marcus stood in the station's communication center, surrounded by displays showing the positions and transmissions of the approaching pirate fleet. The intercepted communications painted a clear picture of the Syndicate's command structure and internal dynamics. Scarthak commanded through a combination of fear and careful manipulation of his captain's greed, but that system was more fragile than it appeared. "The preliminary phase is complete," reported Kexthul, the station's communication officer. The tall, mantis-like being had initially been skeptical of Marcus's plan, but the evidence of discord among the pirates was becoming impossible to ignore. "I've successfully inserted the modified transmissions into their communication network." Marcus studied the readouts, showing how his carefully crafted messages were propagating through the pirate fleet. To external observers, they would appear to be routine communications between ships, but each message contained subtle suggestions designed to exploit existing paranoia and ambition. Captain Vexmore of the cruiser Bloodclaw believed that Captain Tithron was planning to claim a larger share of the station's wealth. Captain Tithron was convinced that Vexmore was feeding information to Scarthak about his loyalty. Neither suspicion was true, but both captains were now taking actions that made their fears self-fulfilling. "How many ships have been affected?" Marcus asked, watching as new communication intercepts appeared on his displays. 14 captains are now actively suspicious of at least one other captain in the fleet, Kexthul replied, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of the monitors. 3 have begun moving their ships into positions that could be interpreted as either defensive or aggressive. Marcus nodded, satisfied with the progress. Humans had refined the art of psychological manipulation through thousands of years of warfare, politics, and survival. The techniques that had worked on medieval battlefields and corporate boardrooms were proving equally effective against alien pirates. A new alert flashed on the tactical display. One of the Syndicate's ships, a fast attack craft called the Razor's Edge, had broken formation and was accelerating ahead of the main fleet. Its captain, a young Zarathi named Clawtek, had apparently decided that arriving first at Kepler 7 would give him advantages over his competitors. "Perfect," Marcus murmured, making notes on his personal tablet. Individual ships could be handled much more easily than coordinated formations. Clawtek's ambition was about to become his death warrant. Chief Engineer Vexelier approached, her 8 legs clicking on the metal floor. "The station's camouflage systems are ready for activation. I still think this plan is insane, but the technical implementation is sound." Marcus looked up from his displays. "You've done excellent work. How long can we maintain the masquerade?" 6 to 8 hours, depending on power consumption and system stability. After that, we'll need to reactivate normal operations or risk permanent damage to critical systems. "It won't take that long," Marcus assured her. "Once the first phase is complete, we'll either be celebrating or dead." Admiral Kethvar's voice echoed through the communication center's speakers. "All personnel, this is Admiral Kethvar. We are beginning final preparations for the defense of Kepler 7. All non-essential personnel should report to their designated shelters. Security teams, take your positions. Engineering crews, stand by for system modifications on my command." Marcus activated his private communication channel. "Admiral, I need to speak with you privately." Minutes later, Kethvar arrived in the communication center, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Thraxian scales had taken on the deep purple coloration that indicated extreme stress among his people. "The Razor's Edge will arrive in approximately 90 minutes, Marcus reported. "Clawtek thinks he's being clever by racing ahead of the main fleet, but he's actually doing us a favor. One ship is much easier to eliminate than 43. Kethvar studied the tactical display. "Even one ship has enough firepower to damage the station significantly. Our defenses weren't designed to handle military-grade weapons." Our defenses weren't designed to be invisible either, but we're making it work. Marcus called up a new set of schematics showing modifications to the station's mining equipment. I need authorization to implement the final phase of the defensive preparations. The Admiral examined the technical specifications, his 4 eyes widening as he understood what Marcus was proposing. You want to turn our mining extractors into weapons. They already are weapons. We're just changing the targets. A focused particle beam that can tear apart asteroid rock will do interesting things to starship armor. But the power requirements, the targeting systems, the coordination needed... Kethvar's voice trailed off as he realized the scope of what Marcus had planned. Everything has been calculated and tested in simulation. The modified extractors will have the firepower of military-grade weapons with the advantage of complete surprise. Clawtech will never see it coming. Kethvar was silent for a long moment, studying the technical specifications and tactical projections. Finally, he nodded slowly. Authorized. But Chen, if this fails, we'll have revealed our capabilities to the main fleet. They'll know we can fight back. If this fails, what the main fleet knows won't matter, Marcus replied. But it won't fail. Clawtech is arrogant, inexperienced, and completely unprepared for what we're about to show him. As the Admiral left to coordinate the final preparations, Marcus turned his attention to the broader tactical situation. The main pirate fleet was still several hours away, but their communications were becoming increasingly chaotic as his psychological manipulation took hold. Captain Vexmore had begun broadcasting subtle threats to other ships in the fleet. Captain Tithron had repositioned his cruiser to cover his rear arc, a move that other captains interpreted as preparation for betrayal. 3 smaller ship commanders had formed a loose alliance against what they perceived as a conspiracy by the larger vessels. Most importantly, several captains had begun expressing private doubts about Scarthak's leadership and the wisdom of attacking a heavily fortified mining station. The seeds of mutiny were taking root, exactly as Marcus had planned. Kexthul looked up from his communication console, his compound eyes reflecting confusion and amazement. The intercepts are showing increasing hostility between fleet elements. How did you know this would work? Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching the tactical display as red dots representing pirate ships began spreading out in increasingly disorganized patterns. Because I understand predators. They're strong when they hunt together, but they turn on each other the moment they sense weakness or opportunity. And humans? What are humans? Marcus smiled, and Kexthul noticed that the expression didn't reach the human's eyes. Humans are what happens when prey evolves into something else entirely. An alert chimed as the Razor's Edge entered the outer edge of the sensor perimeter. The ship was moving fast, its captain clearly eager to reach Kepler-7 ahead of his competitors. Marcus watched the approach vector and nodded with satisfaction. Clawtech was following exactly the path that would bring him within range of the modified mining extractors. All stations, this is Marcus Chen, he announced over the station-wide communication system. The first phase is beginning. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and follow your instructions exactly. In 20 minutes, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate a human. Throughout the station, beings who had spent years dismissing Marcus as a weak curiosity now hung on his every word. The Corvin warriors had set aside their pride to follow tactical instructions from someone they had previously mocked. The Vorthak had suppressed their individualistic instincts to coordinate with species they normally considered inferior. Even Thais had volunteered for a role that put her in significant danger, despite her people's usual aversion to violence. Fear was a powerful motivator, but Marcus had tapped into something deeper. He had shown them that survival wasn't about individual strength or technological superiority. It was about the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect what mattered. The Razor's Edge appeared on the visual displays as a sleek, predatory shape bristling with weapons. Clawtech had designed his ship for maximum intimidation, covering it with spikes, serrated edges, and decorative skulls from various species. It was the vessel of someone who wanted his enemies to know death was coming for them. Marcus activated the mining extractor targeting systems, watching as the massive industrial devices slowly turned toward the approaching pirate ship. The extractors had been designed to track and process asteroids, but their particle beam weapons were more than capable of dealing with armored targets. Extractor arrays 1 through 6 are locked onto target, reported Chief Engineer Vexlier from the primary control center. All systems showing green. We'll have one chance to get this right. Understood. Wait for my signal. The Razor's Edge was now close enough for detailed scanning. Marcus could see the ship's weapon ports, shield generators, and engine configuration. Clawtech had built a fast, heavily armed vessel that could overwhelm most civilian targets, but he had sacrificed defensive capability for speed and firepower. That decision was about to prove fatal. "Target is entering optimal range," Vexler reported. 15 seconds to firing solution. Marcus watched the tactical display, calculating vectors and timing with the precision that had made him an excellent logistics coordinator. Everything had to happen perfectly, with no margin for error or second chances. "All extractors fire!" 6 beams of coherent particles lanced out from Kepler-7, converging on the Razor's Edge with devastating precision. The pirate ship's shields flared and collapsed within seconds, unable to handle the concentrated firepower of industrial weapons that had been designed to tear apart asteroids. The particle beams punched through the ship's armor like tissue paper, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Secondary explosions rippled along the Razor's Edge's hull as weapon magazines and fuel cells were breached. Within 30 seconds, Clawtech's pride and joy was the expanding cloud of wreckage and rapidly freezing gas. Silence filled the communications center as the station's crew absorbed what they had just witnessed. A military vessel that could have destroyed any one of their ships had been eliminated with casual efficiency. The mining extractors had proven to be weapons of devastating capability. Marcus studied the wreckage field, making certain that no life pods or escape craft had survived the destruction. Target eliminated. All systems return to standby mode. Prepare for Phase 2. Kex Thul was monitoring the communication traffic from the main pirate fleet, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "They're demanding to know what happened to the Razor's Edge. Scarthak is ordering his captains to maintain formation and proceed with the attack, but several ships are questioning the wisdom of approaching a target that just destroyed one of their vessels." "How many ships are still loyal to Scarthak?" "Difficult to determine from communications alone, but I estimate no more than 20. The others are either openly rebellious or waiting to see how the situation develops." Marcus nodded, making notes for the next phase of his plan. 20 ships were still far too many to handle through direct confrontation, but psychology could reduce that number significantly. He activated the station's long-range communication array and began composing a message to the pirate fleet. It would be broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every captain in the syndicate would hear it clearly. "Attention Bloodfang Syndicate vessels, this is Kepler-7 mining station. Your ship Razor's Edge has been destroyed with all hands. This was a demonstration of our defensive capabilities. We are prepared to negotiate for your withdrawal from this system." The message was carefully calculated to achieve several objectives. By claiming that the destruction of the Razor's Edge was a demonstration rather than their full capability, Marcus was encouraging the pirates to believe that worse was yet to come. By offering to negotiate, he was providing an alternative to the mutual destruction that Scarthak was demanding. Most importantly, by broadcasting on all frequencies, he was ensuring that every captain in the fleet would hear about the negotiation offer, regardless of what their leader might choose to do about it. The response was immediate and chaotic. Multiple ships began transmitting at once, their captains demanding information, making threats, or attempting to establish communication with Kepler-7 directly. The careful coordination that had held the fleet together was dissolving into every captain for himself confusion. Marcus listened to the cacophony with deep satisfaction. The hunt was proceeding exactly as planned, and the predators were beginning to realize that they had become prey. The main fleet would arrive in less than 3 hours, but they would find something very different from what they expected. Instead of terrified civilians begging for mercy, they would face an opponent who had spent months studying their weaknesses and preparing for their destruction. The laughter that had echoed through Kepler-7's recreation halls was about to turn into screams of terror, and Marcus intended to savor every moment of it. 2 hours after the destruction of the Razor's Edge, the Bloodfang Syndicate fleet arrived at Kepler-7 in complete disarray. What should have been a coordinated assault had deteriorated into a chaotic collection of suspicious, frightened, and increasingly hostile ships. Marcus watched from the communication center as his months of careful observation and psychological manipulation reached their culmination. 17 ships have broken off from the main formation, reported Kexthul, his compound eyes tracking multiple displays simultaneously. They're demanding immediate negotiation for safe passage out of the system. 8 more are positioning themselves defensively, apparently expecting attack from their former allies. Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical overview with growing amazement. In 30 years of military service, I've never seen a fleet dissolve this rapidly. What did you say to them? Marcus pulled up the communication logs showing the messages he had been sending to individual pirate captains over the past hour. Each transmission had been carefully crafted to exploit specific fears and ambitions, turning the Syndicate's own paranoia against itself. I told Captain Vexmore that Captain Tithron was planning to claim his territory after the battle. I told Captain Tithron that Vexmore had made a deal with me to eliminate him. I informed 3 smaller captains that Scarthak was planning to use them as expendable scouts, then told Scarthak that those same captains were plotting mutiny. But surely they would verify these claims with each other. They tried, but every attempt at verification just confirmed their suspicions. When Vexmore contacted Tithron to ask about territorial agreements, Tithron assumed it was a threat and responded aggressively. When Tithron moved his ship into a defensive position, Vexmore interpreted it as preparation for attack. Kethvar nodded slowly, beginning to understand the elegant viciousness of Marcus's approach. You didn't create the paranoia, you just fed it until it consumed them. Pirates survive by not trusting anyone, including each other. I simply reminded them why that philosophy exists. A new alert flashed on the communication console as an incoming transmission arrived from the pirate fleet. The image that appeared on the main screen showed a massive Zerathi warrior, his reptilian features scarred by countless battles. This was Scarthak, the warlord who had built the Bloodfang Syndicate through 2 decades of ruthless conquest. "Station Commander," Scarthak's voice carried the harsh authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "I am Warlord Scarthak of the Bloodfang Syndicate. You have interfered with my fleet's operations and destroyed one of my ships. Surrender immediately, and I will allow half your population to survive as slaves." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself in view of the communication pickup. He had specifically requested that this conversation be broadcast throughout both the station and the pirate fleet, ensuring maximum psychological impact. "Warlord Scarthak," Marcus replied calmly. "I am Marcus Chen, Defense Coordinator for Kepler-7. Your ship was destroyed because it posed a threat to this station and its inhabitants. If you withdraw immediately, I will consider allowing some of your vessels to leave the system intact." The silence that followed was profound. Scarthak stared at the human on his screen, clearly trying to process what he had just heard. A single representative of what was considered one of the weakest species in known space had just offered terms to one of the most feared warlords in the galaxy. Throughout the pirate fleet, captains who had been wavering in their loyalty listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The destruction of the Razor's Edge had demonstrated that Kepler-7 possessed unexpected defensive capabilities, but now they were witnessing something even more disturbing: absolute confidence from an enemy who should have been begging for mercy. "You dare to threaten me?" Scarthak's roar echoed through the communication channel. "I have destroyed entire worlds, human. I have scattered the fleets of the Galactic Council and turned civilizations into ash. What makes you think your pathetic mining station can stand against the Bloodfang Syndicate?" Marcus smiled, and even through the communication link, the expression was clearly visible to every pirate captain in the fleet. "Because, Warlord Scarthak, you've never faced a human before, and you have no idea what that means." He gestured to Kex Thul, who activated a series of displays showing detailed intelligence about each ship in the Syndicate fleet. Names, technical specifications, crew complements, weapon loadouts, and tactical capabilities appeared in perfect detail. "Your flagship, the Death Howl, has a crew of 437. Your shields are weakened by the modifications you made to increase weapon power. Your engines have a 17% efficiency loss due to poor maintenance. Captain Vexmore's ship has been sabotaged by his own crew. They plan to mutiny during the first engagement. Captain Titheron is already preparing to flee the system if the battle goes poorly." Scarthak's expression shifted from rage to confusion to growing horror as Marcus continued his detailed recitation of fleet vulnerabilities and internal conflicts. Information that should have been impossible to obtain was being displayed with casual precision. "How could you possibly know?" the warlord began. "Because I've been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment since the day you decided to attack Kepler-7, Marcus interrupted. "Every transmission, every tactical discussion, every private conversation has been monitored and analyzed. I know which of your captains are loyal, which are planning betrayal, and which are already negotiating with my people for safe passage." Throughout the fleet, pirate captains listened to this exchange with growing terror. The implications were staggering. If the human was telling the truth, then their most sensitive communications had been compromised for weeks or months. Every secret, every planned betrayal, every weakness had been cataloged and weaponized. Marcus activated another set of displays showing the current positions of all 42 remaining ships in the pirate fleet. But now the tactical overview included predicted movement patterns, optimal attack vectors, and individual vessel vulnerabilities. "Your formation is collapsing because your captains don't trust each other anymore," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine logistics. 17 ships have already broken ranks. 8 more are preparing to withdraw. Of the remaining 17 vessels still under your direct command, 4 have crews that are planning mutiny, 3 have critical system failures that their captains haven't reported, and 2 are already in communication with my negotiation teams. Scarthak's scaled features contorted with rage, but beneath the anger, Marcus could see the first traces of fear. The warlord was beginning to understand that he wasn't facing a desperate mining station. He was trapped in a carefully prepared killing ground. "You're bluffing," Scarthak snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus nodded to Chief Engineer Vexilier, who activated the mining extractors once again. This time, however, instead of targeting ships, the particle beams lanced out towards several large asteroids in the surrounding field. The massive rocks exploded in brilliant flashes of vaporized metal and stone, demonstrating the raw, destructive power that Kepler-7 could bring to bear. "That was 17% of our available firepower," Marcus announced calmly. "We have sufficient energy reserves to maintain that level of output for approximately 43 engagements, 1 for each of your ships." The demonstration had its intended effect. Several more ships broke formation and began broadcasting surrender signals. Others started moving toward the system's edge, clearly preparing to flee regardless of their warlord's orders. But Skarthak was not finished. The Zarathi warlord had built his reputation on the willingness to fight even when victory seemed impossible, and he wasn't about to let a single human destroy everything he had created. "All vessels, attack Formation Omega," Skarthak commanded. "Target the station's power generation facilities. Whoever destroys their energy grid will receive double share of the salvage." It was a desperate but tactically sound decision. The mining extractors required enormous amounts of power to operate, and if the pirates could eliminate the station's energy production, they could reduce Kepler-7 to helplessness. Marcus had anticipated this response. "All extraction arrays, implement targeting solution Alpha 7, he commanded. "Priority targets are heavy cruisers and command vessels. Secondary targets are ships attempting to flee the engagement zone." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of ship-to-ship combat with maneuvering vessels exchanging fire, it became a methodical execution, carried out by stationary weapons of impossible precision and power. The mining extractors opened fire simultaneously, their particle beams reaching across hundreds of thousands of kilometers to strike targets with surgical accuracy. Pirate ships that had been designed to overwhelm civilian vessels found themselves facing weapons that could destroy them in seconds. Skarthak's flagship, the Death Howl, lasted longer than most due to its heavy armor and military-grade shields. But even those defenses proved inadequate against the concentrated fire of multiple extractors. The massive vessel broke apart in a series of catastrophic explosions, taking with it the warlord who had terrorized dozens of star systems. Other ships fared even worse. Captain Vexmore's vessel suffered the predicted mutiny at exactly the wrong moment, leaving it defenseless as extraction beams tore through its hull. Captain Tithron attempted to flee, but found his escape route blocked by precisely positioned asteroids that Marcus had moved into place hours earlier. Within 20 minutes, the Bloodfang Syndicate had ceased to exist as an organized force. 31 ships had been destroyed outright, their wreckage joining the asteroid field that surrounded Kepler-7. 8 vessels had surrendered and were being taken into custody by the station's security forces. 3 ships had successfully fled the system, but their crews were so demoralized and scattered that they would never pose a significant threat again. In the communications center, silence fell as the tactical displays updated to show the aftermath of the battle. Debris fields marked the positions where pirate ships had been destroyed, while the few surviving vessels broadcast desperate pleas for mercy. Admiral Kethvar stared at the displays with an expression of stunned amazement. "In less than half an hour, you eliminated one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in known space." Marcus began shutting down the extraction systems, returning them to their normal mining configuration. "The battle was won before the first shot was fired. Everything else was just implementation." Throughout Kepler-7, the station's crew watched their tactical displays with a mixture of relief, awe, and growing understanding. The human they had dismissed as weak and inconsequential had not only saved their lives, but had done so through methods that none of them had even considered possible. Zexakar found Marcus in the station's main corridor several hours later, after the immediate crisis had passed and normal operations were beginning to resume. The Vorthak's usual arrogance had been replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "I owe you an apology," Zexakar said, his mandibles clicking nervously. "We all do. We underestimated you badly." Marcus looked up from the repair reports he was reviewing. "No, you didn't underestimate me. You underestimated what it means to be human. There's a difference." "I don't understand." Marcus set aside his reports and turned to face the alien who had been one of his most vocal critics. "You judged humans based on individual physical capabilities, strength, speed, durability. Those things matter in direct confrontation, but they're not what made my species successful. He gestured toward the observation windows, where the debris field from the destroyed pirate fleet was still visible against the star field. Humans survived because we learned to think like both predator and prey simultaneously. We understand how pack hunters coordinate their attacks, but we also know how to turn those same instincts against them. Zexkar followed Marcus's gaze toward the wreckage. The psychological warfare. You made them destroy themselves. I created conditions where their existing paranoia and ambition would naturally lead to self-destruction. Every species has weaknesses. The key is understanding those weaknesses well enough to exploit them effectively. And if we had known what you were capable of, if we had understood the true nature of human intelligence from the beginning? Marcus smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm rather than predatory. Then we would have been friends instead of colleagues. You would have learned that humans prefer cooperation to conflict, but we're very good at conflict when it becomes necessary. Over the following days, as word of the Bloodfang Syndicate's destruction spread throughout the sector, Marcus noticed subtle changes in how his colleagues interacted with him. The dismissive laughter was gone, replaced by respectful attention when he spoke. Beings who had previously ignored his suggestions now sought out his opinions on complex problems. But perhaps the most significant change was in himself. For 3 years, Marcus had endured casual dismissal and contempt, accepting it as the price of working in an environment where his species was neither understood nor respected. Now he understood that he had never needed their approval to be effective. He had simply needed the right circumstances to demonstrate what humans were truly capable of achieving. Admiral Kethvar called him to the command center 1 week after the battle, where a message from Galactic Fleet Command was waiting. The communication was brief and official, thanking Kepler-7 for eliminating a significant threat to interstellar commerce and offering Marcus a position in fleet intelligence. You could have a distinguished career in military service, Kethvar noted. Your tactical abilities have attracted significant attention in the right circles. Marcus considered the offer for a moment, then shook his head. I appreciate the recognition, but I think I'll stay here. Kepler-7 has become home and there's still a lot of work to do. The mining operation? Among other things. But more importantly, there are 2,000 beings on this station who are just beginning to understand what humans can contribute to interstellar civilization. I'd like to help them explore those possibilities. As Marcus walked through the corridors of Kepler-7 that evening, he passed the recreation hall where Zexkar, Thys, and the others were gathered around the gaming tables. But now their conversation included discussions of human tactical doctrine, psychological warfare techniques, and the strategic implications of Earth's eventual membership in the Galactic Federation. They no longer laughed at the solitary human. Instead, they listened carefully when he spoke, knowing that they had witnessed something unprecedented. The transformation of perceived weakness into devastating strength, accomplished through intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect what mattered. The hunt was over, but the lesson would endure. Throughout the galaxy, beings would remember the day that a single human eliminated one of the most feared criminal organizations in known space, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple application of predatory intelligence turned toward protective purposes. Marcus Chen had reminded the galaxy of something they had forgotten. Never underestimate a species that had clawed its way to the top of its own food chain through millions of years of refusing to give up, no matter how impossible the odds appeared to be. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the respect that humanity had always deserved but had never demanded, and in the silence that followed, the galaxy began to understand what it truly meant when humans decided to hunt.